Are you hangry? Know the signs. Uncontrollable yelling.
Why aren't you egg rolls?
Hallucination.
Sushi.
Pants discomfort.
I hate you, pants.
Hangry. It can happen to anyone. Fortunately, there's E24, the app that tells hunger to shut up.
Egg rolls. Thanks, Snoop.
E24. In my medical opinion, it's the best way to order food online, baby.
Everyone, you got the 215 Elm. Doesn't matter what kind of sandwich, sir. I'll explain later. Thank you, sir.
Jimmy John's. Come in. Sir, did you know your house is on fire? Yes, I did. Grab a bucket.
Jimmy John's.
Come in.
Sir, did you know your house is on
fire? Grab a bucket.
Jimmy John's.
Come in.
Sir, did you know?
Yes, I did. Grab a bucket.
Jimmy John's.
Come in.
Sir, did you?
Yes, I did. Grab a bucket. Fire department. Come in. Sir, did you know you... It's okay, Captain. We got it handled. Care for a sandwich? Thanks, but tell me something. Shoot. Why didn't you call the fire department first? I did. Jimmy John's, America's favorite sandwich delivery.
Hey everyone, I want to tell you all about an amazing salon. Joyce's, located at 132 Ferry Street in Everett, Massachusetts. Joyce's specializes in the latest techniques in coloring, styling, cutting, and beach waves. Joyce's features Sukesha all-natural nutrient products and organic color. Joyce's full-service spa and salon, located at 132 Ferry Street, Everett, Massachusetts. 617-387-6688. Specializing in you.
Hey everybody, this is Jim and Paul with your weekly lineup. At 8 o'clock p.m. we have the Twisted Southern Horror Queen with author Lynn Gibson. At 9 p.m. we have Honey, I'm Home with Irina and Shay.
And on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. we have Talk Time with Val. At 8 p.m. we have All Aboard with Dawn Wisman. And at 9 p.m. we have What's the Story with Maria Gentili. At 10 p.m. New Era Talk with Mike and Kathy. And at 11 o'clock we have Rock Talk with Amy Shapalo.
Wednesdays at 8 p.m. we have Whiskey, Cars, and Cigars with Johnny Blender. At 9 p.m. we have Sports Insider with Glenn Spillman.
And on Thursdays at 8 p.m. we have Hot Talk with Jimmy and Paul. At 9 p.m. Something to Consider with Katreese Barnes. At 10 p.m. we have Night Talk with Joe Rocks.
And on Friday at 8 p.m. we have Summer 13 Films with Glenn Spillman and Sean Taylor. At 9 p.m. we have Sports Insider with Glenn Spillman. That's your weekly lineup. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Laugh like the sun always shines, spinning wheel, fun times, and there's always something to remember, always something to consider.
Hi, this is Katreese Barnes and Something to Consider, and tonight I have a very special guest all the way from Georgia. He's a pioneer in his field and in the medical field, health field, wellness field. We have Mr. Dr. Paul Goldberg.
Hi, Katreese.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Yes, I'm down here in Georgia. It's cold down here. Probably not as cold as it is in New York, though.
Oh, it's kind of chilly here.
Yeah.
It's chilly here. But yeah, you're in Georgia. What, and your clinic, the Goldberg Clinic?
We're in a little, well, not so little anymore. It's a town outside of Atlanta called Kennesaw, Georgia. And then we have a retreat center in Brooks, Georgia, on 10 acres right outside of Peachtree City. So we have two facilities. We see our chronically ill people. Most of the patients we see have chronic diseases of some type. We see them in Kennesaw, and some of our out-of-state and international patients are seen at our retreat center, which is in Brooks, Georgia.
Nice. Is it how many people can visit it at a time?
Oh, well, most of the people that come there just stay for 1 or 2 days, and we do an intensive workup on them to find out why they're have developed their illness, their chronic illness. And then they usually stay and they leave the next morning or the next afternoon. On occasion, we have people stay for several days.
So you can find out that much about a person in 2 days?
Well, we actually have a period of about 2 weeks. We call it the 2-week period of discovery, and it just starts with their visit to us. Myself and my associate, Dr. David Tenner, spend about 2 hours on the initial appointment, talking with the patient, going over a case history, doing a physical exam. And, your case history is probably the most important of anything, just taking the patient all the way back from just right after conception, basically, and finding out all about their life. And then we do a physical exam, and then we do laboratory studies. At that point, the patient, if they're out of state or international, they return home, and then they will perform some more laboratory tests with kits that we give them. They'll keep records for 2 to 3 weeks. And then once we have all that material assorted, again, we call that the period of discovery, then we give them reported findings on the phone, or they come back to the clinic and we give it to them there. And then the work begins.
Wow. Now, you said all the way back from conception. I mean, what do you look for if you go that far back?
Well, we want to find out, first of all, about their parents, and any good practitioner will do this. They'll find out about the parents and about the grandparents, also about the siblings, and what kind of history they have there, where they were born, what kind of toxic materials they may have been exposed to. Was it a happy childhood? Was it a trying childhood? Did they have familial problems growing up? Because all these things have a role to play in the development, the genesis of disease. And then we talk about were there any problems in delivery, what kind of things happened after the birth. Did they receive vaccinations? How many vaccines did they receive? And we follow right through elementary school, middle school, high school, all the way up to where we are at the present time. And that's why it takes an hour and a half, 2 hours to interview a patient properly. We're not an office where we run in with a folder in our hand, say, "Hello, Miss Jones, what's your symptoms?" and then run out and say, "Here's your prescription." We really have to find out not so much about the name of the disease the person has, but the person that has that disease. Because, the disease title doesn't really tell us anything. You can have 100 patients with rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, and you're going to have 100 different patients because each person is different. The name of the disease is just a title for their symptoms.
Now, the word vaccine you mentioned in terms of finding out what they were given as a child, is that a big factor? Because that's kind of a hot topic right now.
It can be. It can be a big factor. But what we're really looking at is what I call the total load. What's the total load that the patient has experienced over the years? So when somebody is, I'd say probably our average patient, their age probably around 45 or 50, because we see people all the way from birth all the way up to 80 and 90 years old. We understand we're not looking just at that person that moment. We're looking at somebody sitting before us who is the accumulation of 45 years of eating, 45 years of having emotions, 45 years of exposure to the environment, 45 years of working, 45 years of having various stressors, and all the metabolic activity that has gone into making their cells up. That's the person that's sitting before us, not the person just there with a disease name. So we have to consider this is the person, if it's a 45-year-old person who's sitting before us now. Now, what do we need to understand in order to help this person out? Most clinics, standard medical clinics, or most alternative clinics are just saying, okay, these are your symptoms. We call it this by this name, and therefore we give you a drug, we give you an herb, we give you a homeopathic remedy, we give you a Bach flower remedy, whatever, we give you a diet, whatever it might be, and we're just adding that on top of the 45 years.
Wow.
We want to think, this is 45 years. What do we need to do to literally, because again, we deal with chronically diseased people. What do we need to do to recreate this person? So we may have to tear them down somewhat, undergo some catabolic activity, so that we can regenerate a new person out of this, not just simply throw some treatment on top of the 45 years that they already have. It's analogous to like having a house that's old, but it's got a good frame, and you think you can rebuild it. but it's looks pretty rough. It's got bad plumbing. It's got bad electric system. It's got termites. Well, you don't just take a house like that and just slap a coat of paint on it. You say, okay, what's the history of this house? Let's see what the electrical system is. Let's see what the plumbing system is. And we're going to tear it down somewhat. It may even look a little worse at first. We're going to tear it down, and then we're going to put in new components. And when we're all done, we'll paint it. But when we're going to rebuild that house from kind of the ground up using the structure of the house, the basic structure of the house. And so that's what we do. And we call it recreating the person from the ground on up. And the only thing that limits us is how hard is the patient going to work and their genetic background. I mean, I'm 5'6". I'm not going to be a professional basketball player, particularly at 66 years of age.
Oh, you don't say.
but within the framework of what we have, and the genetic framework, I should say, we're going to recreate that person and try to get a healthier, more vital person from that 45-year-old person that's sitting there before us.
Now, what kind of things do you do to help recreate that person? I mean,
well, the first thing is understanding. Let's say they came in there with a diagnosis of diabetes. So we want to understand what kind of things may have gone into them developing that diabetic situation. What were their parents' histories like and their grandparents' history like? And what were their habits for the past, we'll stay with that 45-year-old. What was that 45-year-old's history like? And so once we have a pretty good understanding of what the background is of the person, we're going to do some physical examination and some laboratory studies so we get a comprehensive picture of that person. Then when we sit down with them afterwards, and we have all of our information before us, we're going to start by breaking them down a little bit at first. I'm just giving you a very general outline because it's going to be different for different people. And that may involve if they have trouble digesting carbohydrates, we may have to address those issues, which might be things like bacterial overgrowth of the gut. If there is a problem with overeating, we're going to have to give them some counseling about that. And if they've been overeating for a number of years, then we're going to have them undereat for a while because we got to break the body down. And sometimes that may incorporate going on a liquid diet for a period of time. It might incorporate what we call an elimination diet. It might mean, in some cases, not necessarily for a diabetic, but in some cases it might mean fasting for a short period of time. So these are all things that set the body into going what we call a catabolic phase, where it's breaking down tissue. And that has to be very carefully monitored because during that time, the person is going to be releasing toxic materials from their cells. We want to make sure it's done safely, so we'll monitor them with laboratory work and with physical observation, and we'll break them down, and then which we call catabolism, and then we'll build them up, which is called anabolism.
Now, how do you know the difference between a reaction from toxins and just your body going into some sort of other state? Because I know a lot of people, when they do cleanses, they say, "Oh, I'm detoxing. I'm having these detox reactions." I said, you could actually be having an allergic reaction or something else.
Yeah. And that's a very, very good question because there's all kinds of reactions people have. People can be having a toxic reaction. They can be having an allergic reaction. They can be going in anaphylactic shock. I mean, there's all kinds of reactions people can have. So that's primarily, again, you look at the lab work and you also just go on your experience in terms of what the person is going through. In fact, we had a person that was going through a so-called cleanse, is a word that people use. I don't really care for that word too much, but they called it a cleanse, and they had bought some products at a health food store that were supposed to cleanse it. Well, most of these, detoxification is not something you do with products. I mean, products that are supposedly for detoxification, what they usually are herbs and different things that have a laxative effect on the body. So basically just may eliminate some waste that's in the bowel, but it doesn't eliminate the waste that's in the cells. And that's what we're really looking for. What's accumulated in the cells? Because we're only as healthy as our individual cells are going to be. So the body is a self-healing being, it's a self-healing mechanism, but you've got to put the person in the right conditions. And just throwing some herbs or something down there wasn't going to work that. So we had a person who did this, and they came in, they thought they were having a healing crisis. They had taken these things on themselves. They were covered with all kinds of outbreaks of their skin. And I looked at it, I said, you're not having a detoxification reaction per se. You're having an allergic reaction to this stuff you're taking. And we pulled him off, and almost within 24 hours, his outbreak, which was pretty nasty looking. In fact, we have a picture of it on our website. It began to clear up. So you have the person who is supervising the patient, the doctor, needs to be in on that and observe the patient and monitor them with both set of eyes and also with laboratory studies.
So do you do allergy testing?
We do allergy testing, but allergy testing is not everything that people think it is. It's not everything that people make it out to be, and I'll tell you why. When you're testing a person for allergies, you're just saying, do they have a sensitivity to a particular food or inhalant at the present time? And the most common type of allergies are tested for usually food allergies. And food allergies represent usually a transient state of affairs where you're reacting to some food at that time. Now, the question is, when we test a person, sometimes we might test a person for 30 or 60 or 90 different food items. If it comes back with one or two items that they're allergic to, the fact is they're probably actually allergic to that material. They just eliminate that material from their diet and they're okay. But a lot of people come back with 5, 10, 15, 20. I've had people come back with 86 of 90 allergens.
Wow.
Now, if we eliminate all those things from their diet, there's nothing left to eat.
Right.
And even if we did that, and they might feel a little better, and they start eating the other things that aren't on that list or the things that they're not showing that they're allergic to, all that will happen is they'll start developing new allergies to those materials. So one of the things you'll commonly hear from people, if all they've done is allergy testing, is yes, they eliminated the allergens, they felt better for a while, but then a short time later, they started developing new allergies to other things. So the question then becomes, why does the person have those allergies? And that often is related to their ability to digest and assimilate and absorb food materials. Because to have an allergy, you have to, basically by definition, you have to be allergic to a protein material. That's why most food items that have the highest predisposition to the allergens are proteins. So when the person shows an allergy to that, it could be that they have an inborn allergy, but it's just as likely, or even more likely with most people, that they've developed an allergy to that item because they have either overeaten that item over a period of time, and you see people with these habits will eat the same thing day after day, and or they have a digestive problem where they're not digesting that protein efficiently. And if they don't digest it efficiently, then the protein gets through the intestinal membrane, gets into the bloodstream, and sets off an allergic response. So the answer to that is, yeah, you get the person off the thing they're allergic to right now, but you also want to make sure that you increase their digestive efficiency so that in the future they don't have these digestive problems, and therefore they don't have the allergic problems anymore either. And for most people, because of that being the case, once their digestion is improved, they can start eating the things that they were previously allergic to, and those products don't bother them anymore.
Oh, so you can reverse these allergies.
Yeah. Now there are some exceptions to that. Like a lot of people are allergic to cow's milk. Well, I mean, we just have to use some good common sense here, which granted a lot of us doctors don't have. And that is that cow's milk is meant for a calf. It's just that simple. It's not meant for human consumption. The cow has a baby. The baby's called a calf. The calf is supposed to suckle from its own mother's teats, and it's supposed to develop into a nice, healthy cow or bull as a result of that. And so God and nature made that milk specifically for that calf. It has the right protein composition, which is much higher in protein than human milk, by the way. It has different fatty acids in it, and it has different carbohydrates in it. In the case of the calf, it has a higher content of protein, has a higher content of fat, and it's meant to change that little calf into, 1,000-pound bull in times. But even the calf doesn't stay on it very long, does it? It stays on it just a short period of time. And the short period of time that calf is out there, and he or she is grazing on grass and puts the milk behind it. But human beings, we not only drink the wrong kind of milk, meaning we don't drink human milk, but then we continue drinking milk even into adulthood. And that's one of the things that keeps a lot of offices busy, particularly pediatric offices, where the kids are coming in and their noses are running and they have ear infections and they got tonsillitis and they got chronic diarrhea and they have colic. And the parents are told, well, the parents are told by the pediatrician, it's normal for your kids to have colic and have indigestion, burping and gas and bloating. And so here's some medication for that.
And that's mostly from dairy.
I'd say that's the most common thing. It's certainly not the only thing. But if we had to look at one factor, it'd be the most common thing. And then people that have children with allergic type issues, and that includes things like ear infections and chronic tonsillitis and colic, they would be wise to, the first thing to look for is if they're giving that kid cow's milk, and to get that out of the diet, because cow's milk is for calves, human milk is for humans. And then, of course, a lot of people as adults, they continue to drink milk as adults, and they can have a protein allergy to the milk, which is common, or they can also have lactose intolerance. They're sensitive to the lactose. And a large portion of the American population is lactose intolerant. In fact, it is actually, scientifically, it is normal to be lactose intolerant. It's normal. It's actually abnormal to be not to be lactose intolerant. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, but it's not the norm. So again, with adults, if you're drinking cow's milk or eating dairy products, you got the wrong fuel for the human body there, and you'd be wise to give it up. And particularly any adult, any race, but particularly people who are African American origin, people that are of Asian origin, people who have an Ashkenazic Jewish background, people who are of Arab origin, they have a particularly high prevalence of lactose intolerance, and they don't need it. And they would be probably much better. Not probably. They would be much better off giving that stuff up. And that doesn't even include the problems with the antibiotics and hormones that are in the milk as well.
Right. So that would be one of the first things people would have to give up on your protocol is all dairy.
Well, we do a 2-week diet diary on everybody, and if we see dairy foods on there, we're going to suggest to the person that may not be very wise for them to do. And certainly, if it also shows they have an allergy to it, that would be another reason to give it up. If they have a lot of bloating and gas as a result of the lactose intolerance, that would be another reason to give it up. I really don't have anything to commend cow's milk for, except it's an excellent food for calves. If I had a baby calf, they're cute little guys, I'd give it its cow's milk.
Well, I've done a zillion different protocols in my life, from anti-yeast programs to parasite cleanses, yada, 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 yada. I did the Bernard Jensen 7-day cleanse, the Clemavort.
Well, the fact of the matter is, though, Katreese, the only program that will work for you is the Katreese Barnes program, which is probably what you found out over time, as you found out what works for you and what doesn't. And it's the same with everybody. We're all individuals. And
I was going to say I found it interesting that a lot of people push yogurt to reverse yeast issues and bacterial flora and all that. Are you?
Well, if a person has yeast, you have to find out, why do they have yeast? What's the reason they have it? Yeast is just an opportunist. And you can treat it. You can give it nystatin or Nizoral. There's all kinds of things you can treat it with, but ketoconazole. But the thing to do is to find out, why does the person's resistance low so that the yeast is able to grow. And if you discover that, then you address those factors, get the person's resistance up, then the yeast will go away. Otherwise, you can take every medication and every health food supplement, and the problem will just keep coming back.
And the yogurt could make it worse?
The yogurt could make it worse, particularly if you're using cow's-based yogurt, which is you're allergic to or you're lactose intolerant to. Yeah, it would just make it worse.
Do you ever use?
Yeah, whatever we do with people, and I'm just talking about me, but any good doctor really needs to be individualized, again, to the patient, as opposed to whatever symptom that they're expressing. So, patients will ask me, so what would you do if a patient came in and they had chronic fatigue? And I say, well, I would do a thorough case history, I would do a physical examination, and I would do appropriate lab studies for that person. They say, okay, well, Dr. Goldberg, what would you do if the patient had rheumatoid arthritis? I say, well, I would do a good case history, I would do a physical examination, I do appropriate lab studies for that patient. Yeah, but what if the patient had cancer, Dr. Goldberg? They think they got me there. I say, oh, cancer. Well, I would do a good case history, a physical exam, and I would do appropriate lab studies. So it doesn't make it any different what's the name of that particular name of the disease the person has. Because remember, these medical names are simply names that are given to describe the patient's symptoms, which then allow the physician to go to his his Merck's manual and say, okay, this is the name we're going to call it. Therefore, this is the treatment, and this is the insurance code that the patient needs to file. So it's all very neatly packaged. These are your symptoms. This is your name. This is your diagnosis, called diagnosis. And therefore, here is your prescription, because that's what you give for that particular name. And here's your code that you can file with your insurance company. It's a neat little package. Problem is, it doesn't work.
Interesting. Now, so do you ever use things like probiotics or anything that?
Yeah, we use probiotics. I used to be the director of a large probiotic company. However, I find as many people using probiotics that are making them worse as I find using probiotics that are making them better.
Really?
Yes, really. For example, a lot of patients have what we call SIBO, with this small bowel overgrowth. And they're dumping all kinds of extra bacteria down there, and they're just making the situation worse. The term probiotic is like asking a medical doctor, do you ever give a patient drugs? Well, he says, yes, but I won't just give them any drug. I give them a particular drug at the right time for the right problem. And
what kind of test would determine that amount?
Well, it's a whole history on the patient, Katreese. But one of the things, I was talking about small bowel overgrowth. We would check the patient to see if they have an overgrowth of bacteria in the upper portion of their gut called their duodenum. And if they did, that would be at least for that time, that would be a contraindication to giving them a probiotic. And then we want to make sure we give them a probiotic in sufficient quantity and with the right quality, the right types of bacteria. And that's what I was getting at with the drug. And you don't just give anybody a drug. You're supposed to give a drug that's, if you're a medical doctor, that's appropriate for that disease. The same with the probiotic. There's all kinds of strains, there's all kinds of bacteria, and those bacteria do different things. But here's the point I'd like to make, since you asked about probiotics. Lots of people never take probiotics, and they do just fine. Now, why does anybody need to take them in the first place? They need to, the rationale is that there's something wrong with the gut, that the right bacteria aren't growing. If you have a gut which is messed up, that's a technical term, by the way, messed up. If they have a gut that's messed up, and they have all kinds of abnormal bacteria, viruses, fungus, maybe parasites even growing down there, you've got to get the environment right if you want the right bacteria to grow. And until you do, you can throw probiotics down there from now till eternity, and they won't take. We've had patients come in who've been taking probiotics for 5 and 10 years. We do a stool sample on them. We do a microbiology on the stool. And we can't find a single normal bacteria growing down there. They're taking lactobacilli. They're taking bifidobacter. We check the stool. There's none of that growing in the stool. We're looking at under the microscope. We can't find it. I mean, my background's in public health, micro and toxicology and epidemiology. So I'm qualified. I look at it. I have my technicians look at it. And they can't find anything growing there. Well, the reason it's not growing there is because it can't take, because the environment of the gut is so abnormal. So if you look, you have the best soil. I don't. Do you ever do any gardening, Katreese?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay.
My
so
father
we have some organic gardens at our facility in Brooks.
Because my interview went longer than expected, I'm going to break this one up into several segments. So stay tuned next week for part 2 of my talk with Dr. Paul Goldberg from the Goldberg Clinic. Next Thursday, 9 p.m. Something to consider.
Through the night, made me feel so right. and there's always